Hello, bonjour Alberta. Did you know that at least 238,000 people speak Français in Alberta? And those numbers just keep on growing? Oui, oui, c'est vrai, it's true. And thanks to Shaw TV Community Access Programming, we get to reach out to everyone to let you know all about special people, places, events, and activities happening right here in this great province, in both English and en français. That's right, mes amis. We begin the first part of our program in English, and then we repeat it en français. So stay with us. Restez à l'écoute.
Welcome et bienvenue to Hello Bonjour Alberta. I'm Marc Lalonde. Did you know that the Canadian Club of Calgary has been hosting luncheons and speaker series for over a century? Indeed. Today we welcome Danielle Sikander, co-chair of the conference committee, the speakers committee, and Brian Duclos, president of the Canadian Club of Calgary, to tell us all about this venerable organization. Neither of you were there at the beginning, I take it. You're much too young.
Yeah, I was a bit younger.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Let's start by learning something about each of you. If you don't mind, Danielle, we can start with you. Where were you born? What brought you to Calgary? I'm assuming you're not from Calgary. Very few of us are.
I'm not. I was born in the Lower St. Lawrence, the Haut-Bas Saint-Laurent. Je parle en français ici maintenant?
No, in English.
En anglais.
Yeah.
I was born in Lower St. Lawrence in the Matapédia Valley. And it's a little town of about 7,000 people, but I've been living in Alberta for maybe 40 years. And in the meantime, between those years, I've lived back to Quebec City and in Cairo, Egypt for 3 years. And so we are back here now, and so I guess I don't call myself a Calgarian. Well, still I should, but I'm still, in my heart, I'm always a Quebecoise.
Ah, you're still Quebecoise. And what do you do? What do you do with your time?
My time, now I'm retired. I've been retired for 2 years. But previously, I worked at the Foothills Hospital in administration with the Department of Clinical Neurosciences. So for some 30-some years, that's where I work. And at that time when I started, I could hardly speak English. But they still got me there. I thought I'll get fired after 3 days, but I guess I learned English. And at that time, if you wanted to take classes in English, you could not because it was only for immigrants. They never considered the French Canadians that you needed to learn English. But, you know, with a few cries and a few tears, then you hardly, you know, I still have an accent, but it's my identity, so there's nothing I can do about it. And I've accepted it the way it is.
All right.
So, but I'm married, 2 children, a daughter who is living in Calgary, and a son who lives in Montreal. And her husband, the reason we moved out west was because my husband is a geologist. And so there's not much oil in Quebec for now that we know of. And so that's why the reason we moved to Calgary.
Okay, well, thank you. And Brian, with a name like Duclos, you must be from France.
I actually was born in Montreal, and we actually have discovered something interesting recently, that I'm seventh generation Canadian, and we started out from France and came to basically across from Quebec City at the time, and we're around in the days of Plains of Abraham and all kinds of things. The more I'm finding about the family, I'm finding more about actually the history of Canada. Is quite fascinating. And So I came out to Alberta, I think that's one of your questions, in 1972 after I finished university, and have found a home here in Alberta. It was like 200,000 people were here. And
nice little town.
And so, unlike Montreal, where there were kind of like generational things in your way, you could actually, if you didn't like that it wasn't here, you could actually be the one to do it. And I found that pretty interesting. I didn't take full advantage of it, but many have. I've got two daughters. One now living in Dallas, and she's made me a grandfather recently. And that's really kind of fun. And the other daughter's over at ACAD here in town, taking on the arts. I'm really very proud of her. I spent most of my work life working for nonprofits here in Alberta, and as it turned out, raising money for them. And because increasingly the nonprofit sector seems to require funding. Not everything's paid for by government. Once upon a time, the church used to pay for everything, and then, health, education, that sort of thing. And then it seems that over the evolution of time, then government took all of those things over, and now it seems that where that's been placed is on us, society again, and we need to raise money to basically have our social institutions, our cultural, most things are paid for by us a couple of times over.
So you're a professional fundraiser.
I'm a professional fundraiser. I call it a nonprofit manager because it's a business.
We'll provide his number afterwards. I'm sure your phone will be ringing off the hook.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Okay, the Canadian Club of Calgary. Now that's obviously a place where you get together and sip whiskey all day long. We're
Yes.
the Canadian Club.
Of course.
It's interesting you bring up the Canadian. A lot of people say, is there a linkage between you and the Canadian Club whiskey? And actually, Hiram Walker was one of the, I can't remember which club it was down east, but he certainly was very involved in the beginning of the club, and he loved it so much he named one of his whiskeys after us.
Hamilton, 1893.
That's when,
Yes.
when
Wow.
the Canadian clubs of Canada.
Yes,
That was the first
the
club.
first club, yes.
So let's bring it forward from there. How was that founded? And just very briefly, what's the history?
You want to do? I've got sort of an interesting take on it. It's like when you think about it, 1893 wasn't too far away from 1867 when we set up the country, and the country was not what we would say everybody was going in the same direction. In fact, there was a low ebb in the country in terms of where it was going to, what was going to happen to us. Were we going to be annexed by the United States? Were we going to continue to be a protectorate in the Commonwealth, or were we going to go and become an independent organization? And some concerned citizens of the time, I've got some interesting, just sort of staple comments about the setup of it. But it was, they said, we believe in operating under the Queen, but we're a separate country, and we want to determine who we are and what we are. And so be it resolved, this was at their first meeting when they set up Hamilton, be it resolved that this meeting proceed to the organization of a society to be known as the Canadian Club, having as its objectives, number one, the encouragement of the study of history, literature, and resources of Canada, and I've taken that to be the institutions of Canada, the recognition of native worth and talent, and number three, the fostering of patriotic Canadian sentiment. Ultimately, in a non-political, a non-partisan, and non-sectarian, it was a conversation about what it is to be Canadian, and that that chain has not really been broken.
So what you're saying is that the Canadian Club and Canadian clubs, because they then spread to other cities,
all
no
over the
doubt,
country, yes.
are at least partially responsible for defining what it is to be Canadian. That was the goal, and to disseminate that and to, I guess, get buy-in and contributions to that concept.
Mm-hmm. It's and how we motor that, or how we propel that is have monthly, in our case, monthly speakers. Sometimes in other communities it's much more frequently than that, and we're basically all autonomous of each other, but use the basically have the same tenets of and objectives as our base.
So speakers, Danielle, you're part of the committee that brings them in. What kind of speakers have you had in the past, and what's coming up?
Well, my first speaker I invited was a visionary, Dr. Garnet Sutherland. Dr. Sutherland is a neurosurgeon who operates on the brain with a robot. And he was the first in the world to do it. And he's in Calgary here. And we have had writers. Yes, you can see.
Because I was, as the president, I went, a neurosurgeon at lunch. How are people going to be eating and?
Yeah, that's brain.
Anyways,
brain surgery for sure.
He was the most inspiring
He
guy.
was, and then the way he was explaining also, so everybody could understand.
Yeah.
He always had a comparison to something very ordinary, but talking about the brain. But that's the way he is. He just, he loves it. He just lives on it, you know.
So Canadian scientists, obviously, advancing science.
It is, yes. We have had writers, several writers. We have had, last month, we had Andrew Brash, who was the Calgarian who went to climb Everest, but on the way, saved an Australian. And that was his story, and very emotional. And but that's the kind, you know, that brings the people together. You want to listen to their story, and like this month, we have a Colonel Bowley from the Army coming next week, and he'll talk about how the Army helped with the flood last year, and then what they do, their purpose with the Army, and so we always hear a story. So we are trying to...
What about coming up in December here?
December we have the Honorable Jason Kenney. And we don't know exactly yet, but I guess foreign workers, they might speak about foreign workers. That is his topic, really. But we still haven't received a title from him, but we are, you know, hoping. That's up to him. We always leave it to them, you know, to give us a title and the topic. And so far we have been lucky because there has not been anything controversial. We have had a speaker talking about the Yukon and, you know, the cattle, how they brought the cattle from the States to the Yukon. So that was a good story because that's the part of Alberta. You know, we had President Cannon from the university. She was very inspiring. And, you know, you saw the passion when she spoke about what she does. And so it's always something that...
Speakers that illustrate the values of being Canadian,
yes.
and inspire us to follow in their footsteps. So what are the challenges for the club, very briefly here?
Well, I could tell you there's we're actually on a good piece of time right now. It's we're always looking for great volunteers to help us lead us forward.
Yes.
We're when you consider that when we were founded in 1907, that it quickly took the 17,000 people that lived in Calgary by storm, and it was the only club in town, and there were 600 members.
600, right.
Today, with the Canadian Club, we have about 130 members,
Okay.
There is the Women's Canadian Club here in town as well.